Thomas Tuchel. Thomas Tuchel has just been announced. It's just been confirmed, really, because there was a lot of murmurings yesterday. I'm talking on Wednesday the 16th now. It's just been confirmed as the next England manager. So I thought I'd just hop on and talk to my four friends about how I feel about that. And I've written down some notes. So this is hopefully going to be a ramble as usual, but with some structure and direction to it. I'm going to break this down into the pros and cons of Thomas Tuchel, Tom Tuchel being made the England manager. I'm going to go cons first. So, first of all, he's German. He's the third foreign manager we've ever appointed as England manager, and so from that point of view, just from a foreign, I hate that word, but like a foreign aspect, my experiences of England have largely been through these foreign managers. So Sven-Göran Eriksson, people look favourably upon that, and I think there's an element of nostalgia involved there. But ultimately, it was a big failure with a really, really talented golden generation, as pessimistic as that term has become since. And then Fabio Capello, I remember watching England versus Croatia qualifier, the one where I think we won 4-1 and Theo Walcott scored a hat-trick. And it was sometime in, I'm going to say 2008 or 9. And we were heading to the World Cup in 2010. And I remember I was watching the screen in a pub, and I was like, fucking hell, we're going to win the World Cup. Like, I really, really felt like we were. Like, the pedigree of Fabio Capello before he came on board, and the way we played during that qualification, people forget how fucking good we were in that qualification. We were top scorers. I don't know if we were unbeaten, but we were certainly one of the strongest records going into the tournament. I remember that. And then just crashed and burned at the tournament. So the question isn't is the common thread between those two, potentially you could paint them as failures, the foreignness of the manager, because that would be ridiculous from a tactical point of view. I don't think that Sven-Göran Eriksson was necessarily a tactical genius, but Fabio Capello arguably was. I mean, he had the credentials to show for it. What I'm getting at here is more about the baggage of the job and whether a non-English person can understand that baggage. Now, we've seen with Sarah Wiegman for the women's team that some people can. But the question is, can Thomas Tuchel? Because Fabio Capello couldn't. From a PR point of view, he was clearly jaded by the media attention. He clearly didn't understand the neediness of the English fandom around wanting to win a tournament. And through all the stories about the camp at 2010 World Cup, it was clear that he didn't understand how to manage the egos of the dressing room, but also the egos of the media and the fans. The way he shut them off, and he just didn't understand that side of the culture of English football. And I'm being careful with our words there, because I don't want it to be like he didn't understand the culture. Of course he understands the culture of English football in a general sense, but I think there's really specific nuances to the English national team that are negative nuances. I'm not saying that they're high and mighty nuances that Fabio Capello couldn't possibly get to. They're negative nuances. We're needy, we're desperate, we're haunted, we're tortured, we're we've got trauma. We've got trauma. And I think it's important for an English team coach to understand this. Thomas Tuchel might understand this. He's a fucking intelligent guy, but that's just point one. And to add on top of that, he's German, so I think that does carry more weight than a Swedish manager or a Italian manager. And the only way I can describe that is because I don't give a fuck, really. Like, I'm not one of those, like, jingoistic people that's, like, fucking singing 10 German bombers and all that. I'm not into it. All I'm saying is that it still permeates the English media to take notice of that. And the English media is such a huge factor in the England team. We've seen that when Lee Carsley didn't sing the national anthem and he had Irish heritage. That was a massive fucking story. And he's a guy who was born in Birmingham with Irish heritage, not singing the national anthem. That story flooded every outlet for like 2 weeks. And it was out of control. It was just over the top, in my opinion. In regards to Tuchel, a German manager who's almost certainly not going to sing the national anthem, among other things that we, for some reason, want from our English national team manager, you can times that situation, that Carsley situation, by 10. That's just going to be like a rolling story. Like, Thomas, can you really understand the nature? Thomas, are you going to sing the national anthem? Thomas, do you really get the just questions about his, like, the fact that he's German and the background of the culture, and I don't know if I can be fucked. Like, I'm just already bored of that narrative, you know? And the question is, can he handle that? Can he handle that? Some things would suggest he can, but we'll come on to that. Okay, 5 minutes for the first fucking point. Nice one, Fred. Just another point about the England DNA approach. So that was that kind of protocol set up in, what was it, 2011, was it? Or maybe it was earlier, 2009, about building the English talent pool, players and managers alike, from the ground up, the grassroots up. And Lee Carsley is a product of that. And that is one of the reasons why I would have kept Lee Carsley as our full-time manager. And Thomas Tuchel fucking isn't. He fucking isn't. So that, to me, our second appointment after that DNA protocol was announced, because Roy Hodgson, I think, was already in the job. Sam Allardyce doesn't fucking count because he was only there for a day. And then Gareth Southgate was kind of part of that. I mean, he was on the board when they announced England DNA. Lee Carsley is a product of that protocol. And so that would have made sense to me. But then Tuchel is really kind of the second appointment after Southgate since the protocol was announced. And that just feels like it's jettisoning a decade's worth of foundations that you've been trying to build. And yes, we have the players to show for it, but it's a shame we're not backing the manager we have to show for it. Because Carsley, he is the equivalent of the Spanish manager who just won the Euros. He won it with the 21s, then he won it with the senior team. I've forgotten his name. But he is the bastion of how that process can work. And Carsley could have done that, and we've just kind of fucked it off, and that's annoying. I think tactically, you could argue Tuchel isn't as progressive as just attacking really as a Carsley. I think he was criticised certainly in his second year at Bayern, despite the fact Kane scored 1 billion goals. He was criticised even at PSG because he had the likes of Neymar and Mbappe in his team and they weren't scoring 19 goals a game. But I think, more to the point, he was criticised at Chelsea during, albeit a difficult time for them, as being a relatively defensive manager. And that was he before or after Conte? But that was within that kind of era where the Chelsea fan cohort were worried about kind of this string of defensive approaches. And I think second Mourinho stint was around that time too. And that's a concern, because I think that was what we kind of wanted to get rid of when Southgate left, was like a defensive ethos to an attack-minded set of players, I would say. And Tuchel, yes, they've said he's tactically flexible, but he does seem to lean on the conservative side of progressive. So we could expect a 3-5-2 here. And that's all well and good, but you know, we had two anchoring midfielders for a long time under Southgate, and he also played five at the back quite a few times. And I don't know, it just feels like, is it really tactically? It's a progression in terms of his expertise from Southgate, but in terms of the ethos, is it really a progression from Southgate? That's the question. Final point on the cons is camp harmony and how will it end? That's what I've put. This is again going back to the understanding of the English national team culture, and how Capello was, you know, just completely bottled the whole camp harmony during the 2010. Look, it was a difficult time with the English media and the national team, don't get me wrong, and Roy Hodgson couldn't do much better. But I do think there's an issue with understanding that, and will Tuchel understand that? He's an intelligent guy, I hope he does. But this camp harmony that we've built with Southgate, which is built upon absolute, like, is altruism the right word? Just like a pure giving nature to the players, and the players to the manager, and from the team and the manager to the media, and the players to the fans, and the England brand to the fans, with how they built the YouTube channel, and all these things really matter in terms of the PR relationship with all the elements in that circle. And can Tuchel retain what's been built there? And that is from a national point of view. Like, does he understand how important that is to the England national team's success as a German? But also, just from a purely management point of view, has he shown that he has the chops to temper chaos, basically, if that was to come around the corner, which it really could do? I mean, we saw with Carsley last week, the loss to Greece. Everyone went fucking nuts. Like, the whole of the world went fucking nuts over a loss. And is he going to be able to deal with that? Okay, now onto the pros. So let's do the flip side of that. He has shown evidence that he can deal with PR chaos. So he was at Chelsea when Abramovich was being investigated. I think it was financial reasons, and Abramovich had to step back, and I think ultimately stepped down while Tuchel was there. And all that time, Tuchel was being asked a lot of non-footballing questions with heavy political implications. And that is something that is asked of a lot of the England manager. And Southgate did that really well. Southgate had to answer questions about, like, sexuality and Saudi Arabia's attitudes, and obviously racism. And he did so well with all of that. Can Tuchel do that? There's evidence to say that he can, because he dealt with that Abramovich situation really, really well. And he dealt with the PSG affiliations really well as well, to my memory. Another pro, I would say, on the flip side to Capello, for example, and this isn't from a national point of view, he is emotionally intelligent. He seems emotionally intelligent. Although he's had his training ground bust-ups, and he does seem to fall out with some of his clubs towards the end of his tenures, he's clearly an intelligent guy. Like, the way that he talks, and burping. The way that he talks, when I watch him, he's someone that you do kind of want to be managed by. He seems like the type of manager that you would be happy to be around and talk to. I'm just reading emotional intelligence from him, which is really, really important, because Gareth Southgate was the most highly emotionally intelligent football manager, I think, arguably, in working, like, alive. Like, and I think he isn't the best at some other things, but in terms of emotional intelligence and man management, he is the best out there. And so that's an expectation from the squad and from the media now that needs to be fulfilled. And I think there's an argument to say Tuchel can fulfill that. I'll put two together here. He's in his prime, and big players will listen to him. I think those two come together, and they're both really important. I think an understandable criticism of Southgate was, even despite the pedigree that he'd built up over his tenure, getting to semi-final, finals and whatnot, did he have the stature to demand from and dictate... Demand from didn't make sense. Did he have the stature to dictate players such as Bellingham, Kane? Oh, the superstars, really. Superstars who've won Champions Leagues and whatnot. And he hasn't. Southgate hasn't. He has not won much. I think was it the League Cup, or was it even that? And that was a big problem. Now, Tuchel, he has won the Champions League. He's won many, many league titles, albeit not under Chelsea, I don't think. Not that really matters. He is in his prime. He's just had to step down from Bayern Munich. But, I mean, you don't get much bigger jobs than Bayern Munich. And if you think about, say, Real Madrid needing a manager, or now United might be looking for a manager, teams like that, they would look at Tuchel. And they wouldn't look at Southgate, and they wouldn't look at Carsley. And so there is something to be said for that. He is in his prime. And so that leads you on to think that the big players will absolutely listen to him. They'll absolutely respect him. Not only because he's got the type of nature to be respected, to demand respect, but also because he has the trophies to show for it. He has the credentials to show for it. And it's not just like he has the credentials, but he's kind of an over-the-hill 70-year-old with credentials. I think Capello was like 60 when he took the job. But he's 50. You know, he's in his managerial prime, and it feels like he's still at the forefront of tactical conversations around like where the game is going. And so he's still an innovator, is what I mean. So that's good. I think players like Bellingham, who might have had it in the back of their mind that, you know, Southgate maybe hasn't got what it takes to tell me what to fucking do, Tuchel does. That's important. So the next two I'll do together as well. Yes, like I mentioned, he's won the Champions League and other major tournaments at club level. And that's largely because he instills his ideas quickly. I can't remember exactly when he came into the Chelsea setup, but it was in the middle of... I know it was in the middle of the Champions League campaign. I think Lampard had got them out of the group at least. I think he might have even done one leg of the knockout stage. And then Tuchel came in and instilled his ideas quickly and took them to the final and won. And he beat City, beat Pep Guardiola, who was another option for the England manager. So there's something to be said for that. I think at every club he's gone to, he seems to have this kind of old worldy Mourinho-esque, or maybe still a Conte-esque ability to instill his ideas quickly. He won the Bundesliga in his first year with Bayern Munich. He won the treble with PSG, I think, in his first year. And he got to the Champions League final in the same year, or maybe that was his second year. But there doesn't seem to be this delay that you would have with other elite managers, such as like Pep Guardiola. There was a clear delay with Pep Guardiola to get them to be a Pep Guardiola team. Maybe that's because there's more complex tactics at play, which will obviously be a benefit down the line. But from a national team point of view, you would argue that Tuchel's qualities are more important than Pep's qualities, because Tuchel, you need to be able to instill your ideas not only quickly, but intermittently across camps that might have gaps of a month or might have gaps of 5 months between them. I think after November, we're not playing again until March. So that's really important. That's really brilliant. And he does have the tournament credentials, which is really important because tournament football is different to league football. Yes, he's had to deal with aggregates and whatnot in the Champions League, but that all is experience that can take you to a situation like 1-0 up against Italy in the Euro final. What do you do? He knows what to do. Or because he's done that, because he's been 1-0 up against City in the Champions League final. Or 3-0 down against, I mean, we haven't been 3-0 down against anyone England-wise, but when he was 3-0 down against Real Madrid in the second leg at Chelsea, he knew what to do. He came back and he won and he got to the final. So tournament football, you need to have you need to have like a, what's the word? Not a knee-jerk nature, but he needs to be able to think quickly on his feet. And that is different to a league game where you may be more willing to settle for draws or understand that it might not be your day. Tournament football is about making it your day, and if it is your day, keeping fucking hold of it. And that tactically is different. And that comes down to everything, down to like substitution strategy, for example, which used to fucking drive me up the wall with Southgate. How he just wouldn't make subs or make subs until the 80th minute and then take credit for winning. It used to fucking bother me so much, and I just don't, and thankfully we won't be seeing any more of that bullshit. I'm not saying we won't have late subs, but if they are late, they'll be considered late. Like, they'll be late for a considered reason. Southgate was just standard, late with his subs, and it fucking annoyed me. We need someone who is a flexible, versatile, quick thinker in tournament situations, and Tuchel is definitely that. Which leads me on to say, tactically flexible. He does seem tactically flexible. I've put apparently next to this on my notes because I haven't watched every fucking Tuchel game. I certainly didn't watch every Tuchel game at PSG, just a few Champions League games. I've watched the highlights of a lot of his Bundesliga games. I watched most of the Chelsea games, but I don't know enough about his tactical flexibility to speak on it, but that's what I keep hearing from people who know more than me in that regard. So that's good. And that speaks to his tournament credentials as well. Being tactically flexible at pace is really, really important, and I think that is something that Southgate didn't have. Two more things. He got Harry Kane scoring in the Bundesliga at Bayern Munich. Is what it is. Harry Kane had a record goal scoring and assists year. He beat Haaland in terms of stats. Haaland arguably had an off year, but whatever the fuck, it still counts. It was ridiculous what Harry Kane did last season, and Tuchel did that, and he's done that more than anyone else has at national or club level. So he knows full well what Harry Kane needs around him to succeed, and that has been the elephant in the room of some of the problems with England performances in the last 3-4 years since Harry Kane lost his pace, really. So that's exciting. Final point is, he's a bit of a mentalist, and that's a positive. I like that. I think just in terms of like what the time with Southgate, what I took from that was successes, failures here and there, whatever. But also just from a PR point of view, he was very stoic and he was very considered. And that did mean that the narrative around England was extremely positive, and we want it to remain that way. But there wasn't enough fire in the belly sometimes for me. And you got that after the games. You know, it was all about calmness. So you got that after the games when he was like screaming at the crowd in the semi-final in the Euros and things like that. And that's great. But I'm looking forward to having a guy who's a bit more fucking intense in interviews, in press conferences, and on the touchline. Someone who's really kicking every ball, even if he is fucking German. I'm looking forward to seeing that intensity and aggression and energy from him, physically and verbally. Like, he's tenacious. He doesn't mollycoddle his words. I'm not saying Southgate mollycoddled his words, but he was definitely extremely considered with his words, to the point where it might as well have been written by ChatGPT. Like, he was so careful. It almost stagnated the energy sometimes of the team and the narrative around the team. And it'll be nice to have someone who is a bit more direct. Now, I think there are caveats to that. I don't want, going back to what I said about camp harmony and whatnot and the PR approach, he needs to be really, really aware of those things because they're important to England. But it is going to be fun to see. And I think that, how will it end? Who the fuck knows? I hope it ends with a Euro 2028 win, because that means we won fucking World Cup 26 as well, because I don't think he'd stay on if we didn't. So that's great. I think regardless of how it ends, though, the next 2 years at least are going to be very entertaining. I just hope in a positive sense. So that's my take on Tuchel. I need to be on one of those fucking Sky Sports YouTube channels or whatever. You know they got those fucking like 12-year-olds sat in a circle on Sky Sports YouTube, football YouTube, being like, "Oh yeah, this is who you should take to the Euros and whatnot." Mate, they're just fucking nerds, right? And they I know what I'm fucking talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I need to be on something talking about England. Did you hear me just rattle that off? That was a 25-minute podcast with barely a fucking break in it about Tuchel's pros and cons. I think I fucking smashed that. Someone fucking hire me for a legitimate England, like, what is it? Punditry role. Even if it... Oh, fine, whatever. Anyway, see you next time.